When's the last time you felt sick or ill? When's the last time you were ill?
I think last winter. It's been a while. Started to feel a little bit of something coming up the other week, but it seemed to have passed. But last winter I had to take off a bunch for I think I had COVID actually.
And you have spoken about, written about what that does to your appetite.
Uh,
Would you like to share that with our podcast audience?
yes, I would. So I get hungry, much more hungry when I'm sick, which I think there might be a narrative in the world that you're supposed to eat less when you are hungry because some people get sick and their appetite goes way down. Not me. I my appetite goes way up when I'm sick. I think the only exception to this would be a stomach bug. I think I've had one stomach bug in my adult life, maybe two. And I remember feeling like the last thing I wanted to look at was food. But any respiratory illness or any other kind of illness that I've had as an adult, I notice a substantial increase in my appetite. And I have had clients reflect the same thing. And I've more than a handful of times heard that they feel guilty about that because it feels like most people, quote unquote, have the opposite thing happen. So I would love, and I like to speak to those people, those experiences for whom the appetite increases. I will preface that by saying that I don't know the exact mechanics about why, but I do have some theories.
I would love to hear your theories, Steph.
Okay. My main theory on this is the following. I believe that potentially there is some connection between my increased appetite when I'm sick and my history of an eating disorder. In that, when my body experiences a lack of homeostasis of some kind, it feels threatened. It feels like, oh no, something's going on. Our resources are down. We have less of a window of tolerance to work with. We have less immunity. We have less capacity in general. We need to collect what we know to be scarce, and that thing may be food, because food might be linked to scarcity, right? So my body in particular may say, when the chips are down, collect the resource that we have experienced as scarce at one time. That makes sense from like an evolutionary perspective. And I think that there's a connection. However, I don't discount the possibility that I am somebody who has a very strong appetite to begin with, and that maybe my body just uses, like, appetite seems to be, it's a resource of some kind for my body. It's a sign of thriving of some kind. It's like my body uses food. It likes it. And so maybe it just would do that anyway, even if I didn't have an eating disorder history. But the fundamental takeaway is that I do believe there's a link between lack of homeostasis in the body, represented by illness, also represented by being hungover, being highly stressed. And there was another one that I can't remember right now. That gives the signal to go collect food.
Does it feel very physiological for you then and not so much emotional? Is
Yeah.
there interesting?
Yes. So it's not like my desire for comfort food goes up necessarily. It's not like that. It's hunger. I will eat a meal and then I'd be like, I am hungry again. I need to eat food. I'm getting actual hunger signals and what I would call appetite signals. I feel like I just have this inherent sense that my body needs food.
Hmm. Well, just something to add to the potential theory biologically is if somebody doesn't produce cortisol, there's something called sick day rules, which means if they get ill, they get a cold or something like that, they have to double their dose of hydrocortisone. Because when we get sick, our cortisol levels increase. And like we were talking about in the stress episode, cortisol affects appetite and particularly blood sugar and that kind of thing as well. So I wonder if you're quite sensitive to that response.
I don't know. And I don't know how I would test that.
I don't think you can, Steph.
Oh, well, I want to. Damn it.
I don't think you can because it wouldn't even necessarily be more cortisol. It just might just be how you
Mm.
respond
I mean,
to high levels.
potentially my cortisol might be all wackadoodle because I think it could be because of, I mean, that now I'm like, oh, thinking like, I wonder if that's because I've had, anxiety for a long time, and cortisol is definitely not a stable force in my self. So yeah, there might be a connection there.
Because
Hmm.
I would say that if I feel, I say ill, I want to say proper ill as opposed to just a bit run down. When I've got proper sick symptoms, like whether I'm full of cold or a sore throat or like a very identifiable symptom, I would say in those moments when the symptom's really strong, my appetite probably goes down a bit.
Hmm.
But when the symptoms start to subside a bit, then it comes back, which feels partly physiological, but I think that there's quite a strong emotional element. I can feel very sorry for myself when I don't feel well. I've always wanted to be one of those patients that just, handles it with equanimity. But I'm like, this is so unfair. I feel so bad. And it's like everything's terrible. And I'm really emotional and I'm teary and like all of that kind of thing. And I think that would mean I'm more drawn towards comfort food. And there'll be a sense of like, I deserve some comfort because I just feel so bad.
So it doesn't feel like that physiological
No,
sense.
no. Sometimes if I've been ill and my appetite has really dropped, and then when it comes back, I have noticed a bit of a spike just because I've been eating less for a few
Yeah.
days. And so I would notice that piece as well. But there's a whole, I think, emotional, soothing. I'm in some kind of pain or discomfort. And I've often found that food really helps with physical pain and physical discomfort.
Yeah. Because I don't think, okay, so there's that one, which is the desire for comfort food, which I think makes a lot of sense. I don't experience comfort eating in the same way. My eating will be more of a distress tolerance, intolerance. Like I find being sick to be very threatening. Not like I'm pitying myself, but that I feel threatened by being sick. It makes me feel very vulnerable in a way that makes me feel like it's dangerous, which I think is why I have hypochondria or vice versa, like chicken or egg. And I will feel so uncomfortable with the fact that I feel uncomfortable that eating can be a distraction or like a buffer where it's almost like I need to eat to regulate the distress that's coming up from being sick, which is a different feature of
Mhm.
being sick for me. That has shown up. I think my distress tolerance has gotten much better, but it used to be pretty potent. And so I would have this higher appetite plus this difficulty tolerating the distress of being sick, which would combine. And I used to binge when I was sick. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Binging and sick went hand in hand. And even in recovery, when I got sick, I would eat a lot. I would eat a lot of food when I was sick. It was kind of like, this is just something beyond me.
There is a funny little part of me, and I'm almost a bit like about saying this because it's one of those things you just say it and then imagining like nobody will get it, but maybe somebody will get it. There's a part of me sometimes when I get ill that likes it. I had
Yeah, I
COVID.
hear you.
I had COVID in 2022. And I mean, I was really poorly for a couple of days, like proper fever and all of that. Like I wasn't feeling well at all, but it was kind of nice. And what I mean by kind of nice, and I think that this was more like it was almost like this permission to cancel everything,
Yeah.
do nothing. And when because of how bad I was feeling, it was like zero guilt for canceling clients. Even though because I got it just after I got back from holiday, so I'd had a week off holiday and I'd come to see you before then. It was just after, I say just after, it was like over a week after I saw you. Do you remember it was the first time we met and then I went to Cyprus for a week
Yeah.
and I caught COVID on the way back from Cyprus because I couldn't even leave the house because it was quarantine at the time. So it was just everything I could just order things to be delivered to me
Yeah.
free. No sense of like, come on, Sarah, we really need to walk to the shops. It's only around the corner. All of that. And I watched really fun stuff that I wouldn't normally have watched. I was recommended something that wouldn't have normally been my thing. And it was just,
You
I
really
had a
enjoyed
really
it.
nice time, even though I physically felt terrible. And I still had pity moments. I definitely did. But on the whole, like my memory of it and my overarching feeling was it was really nice
Yeah.
to surrender
I
in
hear you.
ill.
I think that I would feel exactly the same way if my fear didn't come in front of it. But I can absolutely resonate with feeling like kids, you feel like you get this permission There's something about also like, I don't know if we have memory of being taken care of if we were taken care of when we're sick. I know when I get sick, my husband's like, okay, don't bother mommy, and Mike does stuff for me. And then and I don't feel guilty about not working. And if there is something like about that, of that, provided that you're not feeling so sick that you're just like, you can't even pick that up. But food would go along with that because it's part of that package of TV, cozy bed, sleep, napping. You know what I mean? Like it's part of it goes with it somehow. But I don't know. It's almost like the difference between compulsion and like compulsion to eat more when you're sick versus just enjoying eating more when you're sick. I guess maybe I'm asking you to speak to that because I feel such this physiological drive to eat. It's like there's nothing. It's just very it has to happen. What is it like to be sick and feel like you want to? Does it feel compulsive too? I guess is the question.
Well, I didn't want to eat more when I had COVID. And in fact, I wanted to eat less. And because I was ordering food in as well, I was kind of just able to order whatever it was I really fancied in the moment. And that felt kind of nice. I didn't lose my sense of taste, but my appetite went right down. And then when it passed, I didn't get the big spike that I normally got. I don't remember having it, so it can't have been that notable. But what would have happened in the past when I was still struggling with food is that I would get ill, and of course there would be a few days where I didn't eat as much. And of course, there's that voice going like, "Oh, you haven't eaten much for a few days. Oh, good job. Good on you."
Yes.
And then the appetite starts to come back, and sometimes that would be stressful if I was really invested in the weight loss. And other times it was like I would use it as an excuse to give myself permission.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think, well, you hardly eaten anything for the last 4 days. So that means you can have a lot more of these foods because you haven't eaten so
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
the last few days, which is not a helpful way to think and is not true permission. But it was interesting because sometimes then I would get a little bit of being able to
Mm-hmm.
have a little less guilt for a little bit as well.
It's funny because I think that sometimes when we are sick, we can actually increase our intuition around food because that guilt piece is down because the expectation is, for example, when you're saying you could order in food, like when you're sick, you're not going to cook and go to the grocery store and you're going to potentially just order the food or something like that. And I feel like there's less of that you have less of that voice in your head saying, well, you should really X or you should really Y because you're like, no, I shouldn't. I'm sick. So you have the freedom to be like, well, even sometimes we're like, I really shouldn't spend the money, but I'm sick. What else am I going to do? So there's more because those shoulds are removed. I think sometimes it lends itself to feeling more clear about what we want. And that also actually happens in pregnancy, where there's more nausea or something like that. And there's this feeling of having more like, yeah, the should somehow go away. And that happened to me during pregnancy in pieces. But I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. I did have a client session yesterday with somebody who got over, I think I couldn't remember if she said a 9 or 11 days of being sick, either way. And her appetite went down. And she is now in this place where she's like, I can tell that I've lost some weight and I have this wedding coming up in a couple of weeks. And she's like, and I admit that there's a part of me that wants to sustain this so that I, just can kind of get to this wedding. And we talked at length yesterday about this idea of, and this is interesting because there's two mindsets one might have of like capitalizing on it and keeping that running or using this as an excuse to like, oh, now I deserve to eat this other food and setting up a binge. But I think that when the body is pushed, my body has a certain amount of like less food intake that it will tolerate for a certain amount of period of time. And if I push beyond that, so let's say I did get sick and had a lowered appetite for a stomach bug, I might eat less. If I then come out of that illness and feel like, okay, let me, if I've been doing it this long, I can keep doing it. My body would be like, this is too much. We're going to rebel now. And it's not the same. It's not going to work the same way as when you're sick and your appetite might actually just be lower. When you come out of that and your body's like, okay, our appetite is back. We haven't received as much food as we're normally used to getting. I'm kind of on a little bit of a caution alert right now. And then we're further trying to push that by resisting appetite that is there. That usually is going to be this big backfire rebound binge response that happens. And it's like, you got to be careful not to wake the baby, at that point when you're already in a place of like where your body's already a little bit on edge already, to not try to capitalize, this idea of capitalizing on something. And typically for me anyway, I will become hungrier in the week after, and I will have to respect that instead of pathologize that, because I think the instinct is to be like, why am I needing to eat so much? It's like, well, because we were under eating before, and the body doesn't work. The body's just looking at something in a generalization. So it's like, oh, okay, we had a little less of the past week. We're going to have a little more this week. And that respect is so paramount to stay in regulation, because if the guilt is coming in, or the shoulds are coming in, or pushing is coming in, that's where the body starts to be like, hey, we're not getting respected, and I'm going to take over now.
It's a really common one as well. I certainly did, and I've done posts about it before, and people really resonate with it. That idea of when food and your body image and your weight has been so distressing, that desire to want to be ill, to lose weight. I remember thinking, like, what would I actually take? And like at the worst, it's like I would have been happy, say happy. I would have been willing, and I thought I would have been happy. Don't know what the reality would have been, to have been pretty ill for a period of time. If I felt like, because I think in my head, I thought, well, if I got really sick and then I lost weight and my body was the size I wanted it to be, and then of course I recover from being ill, then that somehow like
it's like
undoes all my disordered eating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm just
Start
completely
again.
normal around food.
Yeah, totally. I think we all have had this thought.
But it's interesting then, the potential psychological payoff to being ill. Like, one, there's the potential psychological payoff. Oh, yeah, I guess it's psychological and emotional payoff of a physical change in your body. And like we've just spoken about, the payoff of giving yourself permission. Have you ever had it? I don't know if this would be you, where you think you're getting sick and you're like, I'm definitely getting sick. And then you don't, and you actually feel disappointed.
No, I can appreciate it, but I don't.
Yeah, I think I think I have.
If I didn't have this fear part, I think I would.
Yeah. I have such good memories as a kid of being poorly.
Me too.
Really
Really
nice
good ones.
memories. I'd always get taken to my grandmother's house, and she was lovely. And I might eat lemon biscuits. And my mum would always ask me, like, she would do whatever dinner that I wanted.
Yeah.
And it was a real time of being cared for.
Yes. Did
So,
you
yeah,
have The Price is Right over there? Probably not. The TV show, the
I
game
think
show.
so. I think we
That
did.
was sick days through and through. Like, you stayed home from school and you watched The Price is Right. And like The Price is Right was the show you got to watch only when you were sick, like Bob Barker. That was like the living the dream. And my mom would make me Lipton cup of noodle soup, and I would eat that. I would eat, like, yes, you're right. Like, I have some
Yeah.
great memories.
It was supermarket sweep for me. I think that was
Yes.
one of the daytime. Did you have supermarket sweep?
Yes, I loved that show.
No way. I'd love to know who your host was. I'm going to look it
Can't
up on
remember.
YouTube. We had a guy called Dale Winton who was very camp and very orange.
Orange, like a tanning bed.
Yeah,
Orange.
like Trump orange. Yeah.
Got it. I can't remember who we had, but yes, these shows. And then you know what the buzzkill always was when your siblings would come home from school. Like when they got home, you're like, my day is over. Like I would have been home now anyway. It's like this special time when you were home by yourself. Oh, I'm just now. So like if you are somebody who is now a caregiver or a caretaker, like where you aren't receiving, which is a big population of people. I keep saying population today. A big percentage of people, I think, with food issues, that potentially there is some kind of association with being sick and finally getting what you deserve, which may also coincide with the food. Like that might be this opportunity to feel guilt-free about taking, whether that's care from others, support, or food.
And if you're used to being the one to take care of other people and you can't because you're ill, and you're watching like the impact, the fallout of you not being the one doing everything. I have someone in my life who is ill a lot. And she gets really ill.
Mm.
And she just soldiers on through. She never takes any time off. She never adjusts what she's doing. And I always look at it and think, and now I'm not saying that I think it's particularly healthy, and I have told her so, but there is a little part of me that goes, gosh, the second you're ill, you're like, right, cancel everything. I'm taking to my bed. And watch these people that kind of soldier through and push themselves. And I'm like,
Oh,
I don't do that. I go straight into, and I think that's possibly why I'm like, oh, I think I quite like it. Because whenever I get ill, it's like, no, I'm taking the time. I will not work when I'm ill.
yeah. See, I will, unless I'm very ill, in which case, because then it just actually makes me feel like end up feeling I have more to catch up on, even though I don't. That's not healthy either, by the way. But also, I think that everyone's baseline is relative. So, like, if the same goes for pain, like, there's people who, like, if I have back pain, I mean, this isn't necessarily true, but like, let's say I had back pain and I'm like, oh, I'm down and out, I can't move. Whereas other people I know who have back pain and go to work every day, it's like there's something about what's relative to you that I think our reactive behavior depends on. I also want to bring up the point of orthorexia in combination with getting sick, because when I used to get sick and orthorexia was forefront, it was an added stress. I was like, oh my gosh, like my full time job was about maximizing my immunity. And I remember, ironically, I used to go from store to store to store getting wheatgrass shots and making sure they were the fresh ones and the this and the that and the this and the that. Running my when I should have been in bed. I opted for the nutritional perfectionism instead of actually just resting. And there was almost like this additional guilt layer of like, my appetite's up, my hunger's up. All I want is carbohydrates, and I should be having vegetables. And so I would force myself to eat all these green juices and stuff when my body just wanted like a bagel, but I was not having a bagel. So I think that actually made my appetite so much worse. Like that it was resisting really an appetite and trying to fill it with these health foods because I thought that was the morally responsible thing. And I was afraid that if I didn't, I'd be somehow like further compromising my body. And so, and then sometimes I'm like, maybe that's why your body goes for food when you're sick, because it's like, yeah, we remember not getting what we needed so many times. On the flip side, I also used to binge a lot when I was sick. So sometimes it would just override this, but I was always fighting the inner sense that I should be really extra taking care of my body at that time. Like nutrition is more important now. And ironically, that's when my nutritional needs would change from because I like having nutritional foods, but when I'm sick, I don't want that. When I'm sick, I don't want a salad. I don't want fruit. I
What do you
want
want when you're sick?
carbohydrates. Like I
So what
want
would be the go-to?
cereal and like toast and peanut butter. Like I want, I mean, I'm trying to think because I want more carby foods, but I would want salad, and I just don't.
Yeah.
But then what it's interesting because when I come out of being sick, I do. Like when I'm done being sick and I'm finally back to myself, I'm like, I really could go for a big fresh salad, and that's when that instinct will come back. But when I'm sick, I don't want healthy food, quote unquote.
Yeah. When you are healing from disordered eating and you are trying to regulate your appetite, getting sick can absolutely throw a spanner in the works. And I'm sure you've heard it before as well, but I think we've had it in the community before and people I've worked with who, when they've lost their appetite, when they're ill, they're nervous about the appetite returning because they can sense that their
Yeah.
appetite might come back and that it might come back stronger because that's just been their experience in the past. And I guess it might be helpful to speak to like navigating an appetite that has seems to have suddenly shot up when
Yeah.
you're trying to do this work to be like, I
Yeah.
want my appetite to feel balanced. And it's really scary to feel that hungry, to feel like you are eating to the point that it's uncomfortable to hold that much food in your body, but like that pull.
Yeah.
So yeah, just some nice reassuring words and
Yeah.
help for people.
Well, on the preventative side, like, and this is a conversation I had with my client yesterday, who's just coming out of 9 to 11 days of being sick. one of the things that we talked about was preempting. So the anchor meal concept, that's a really important concept potentially coming out of being sick and having a lower appetite and moving into a higher one, because that's the time where your body's going to be like, okay, right, I'm sensitive to having just not had enough food. Ensuring that we're eating regularly and having nourishment in satisfying ways in a predictable way can prevent the kind of over hunger that triggers a binge following being sick. So expecting that you're going to be potentially more hungry, integrating anchor meals that are substantial, like not little ones, real anchor meals, so that you're staying on this side of your hunger. Because that there's like a line, and if you cross that line of hunger into over hunger, your body may be like, never mind. But if you can stay on this side of it, then your body, it's like that baby metaphor, like keep that baby sleeping. It's not necessarily going to wake up screaming if we're making sure that it's safe and sound.
Mm-hmm. So there's a case to be made for getting out ahead of it,
Mm-hmm.
even, eating a bit more, planning to eat a bit more. It's not the same as in I wasn't ill, but when I got back from India, um, obviously I had been eating less because there was less food available. I had been eating different kinds of foods. I had been pushing my body to its limit, and I'd lost some weight, and I could feel that like, oh, okay, what's this going to be like coming back? Is my appetite suddenly going to spike? Am I going to suddenly feel a bit kind of compulsive around foods that I haven't had availability for? And so part of the way that I did that was before I even wanted the food, my first shop, I bought myself, and I don't even buy them very often, but like my favorite biscuit or cookie is and you don't like them, you've tried them, the caramel chocolate digestives. I really like them. And they used to be a binge food for me. I used to like demolish a whole packet of them. They made the packet smaller anyway. They used to be bigger packets back in the day. And I just bought a packet before I even felt like I wanted, I don't know, something sweet like that. I just bought it and I had it and I started eating that food. And that was something I wanted to get out ahead of a craving.
Mm.
Whereas I certainly previously I would have gone like, oh, well, I've hardly had any sugar for a month, so I should try and like keep on this train. I was really, I was just, and I was talking about it a lot with one of my friends at the time as well as like, I feel like I need to just be able to talk about this. And I was able to talk about it with Becca a bit too, who obviously came to India with me. And that worked, I think, really well for me. So it's how I'm translating that to this is it's almost how I'd be thinking of it now is, and if it happened the same with illness, I don't want to wait until my appetite really ramps up. I don't want that experience. So it's almost like once I feel like, oh, actually, I could eat a bit more, I'm going to kind of get
Mm.
myself to eat a bit more and make that. I'm not talking about eating loads of food when I'm not hungry and putting food in my body when I'm going like, oh, I don't want this. But
Yeah.
just getting ahead a little bit, I think, is really
Yes,
regulating.
I do too. I think there's also something to be said of not rushing back into life too fast, because I think that some of us are like, okay, I don't feel sick anymore, back to normal. And I think we need more transition time than that. So sometimes binging, eating, restricting can be a defense mechanism against something, right? And I know that I would have used either restricting or binging as a way of kind of saying no, or like putting up kind of standing up for myself a little bit. And if I rushed back to work or to like immediately re-engaging in things because I thought, okay, you've had your sick time, now it's over, get back to the grind, without giving myself the respect of like, yeah, you can start re-entering life, but like it's okay for you to get to bed a little earlier. It's okay for you to say no to more things. You don't have to be signing up for, you don't have to be saying yes to things that you don't need to do during this time. That would also potentially prevent the need to use food as my translator.
And that would be a tough one for some people who have a hard time saying no to things.
Yeah.
It's like, well, technically, I feel physically
Right.
like I could, so therefore there's that pull,
Yeah.
and then I should because I don't feel
Right.
like I. It's back to the permission thing, I guess, that I can certainly
Yeah.
relate to, where it's like, well, I'm starting to feel better when I'm just feeling a bit run down. It's like, oh, I could push myself, and because I could,
I think
maybe
we're
I
a culture
should.
of pushing ourselves a lot. I think we need more time. I need more time coming out of sickness as much as I do inside of it. I'm slow to transition. Like I just Need some
There's
grace.
there's two people in, well, one person who used to be in my life, one person who still is. One of the New York therapists, she's had several health things, several major surgeries. It's a heart problem she's got, and she has like a rule, if you like, that she always walks home from the hospital. It's like 5 miles. After major surgery, she's done this like 4 times in her life. She will shuffle home from the hospital because she's like, you have to get your body moving again. And this was her kind of thinking. And I was like, oh, whatever. But then when my friend came and stayed with me the other year, and she had surgery while she was at mine, she had a breast reduction, which was still pretty big surgery. Like the next day, she was like, no, I have to be up and I have to be walking and this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking, if I have surgery, I'm like, I don't think I'm moving for 2 weeks.
Mm,
Am I missing a trick here? Is there an advantage to,
yeah.
in certain situations, kind of
Yes.
like getting
There
yourself back
is.
in?
As an occupational therapist, we used to work with that. But I think there's a difference between sick in your immune system and surgery, or something like that. There is value in moving quickly, like to get the body acclimated back to movement. But I think it's something different when you're talking about energy depletion from being ill. And I still think even there's room for that. But I think we're generally tending to do that anyway as a culture of like back to work, back to work. People go back to work before they're fully ready to go back to work. I think that's enough moving back into life. You don't need to also be walking 5 miles a day. And also I think this is individual and to everyone feel that out for themselves. But I think people are more likely to push than to rest. And for those of you who tend to be pushers, think about there might be a balance on the other side and maybe vice versa.
And actually, when you mentioned it then, I thought, I think there is a bit of a difference as well to pushing yourself into psychological and emotional stress and energy compared to doing something because you actually think or believe, or your sense, your intuition, if you like, or your belief system is this is actually good for my body to get it moving. That feels very different to I need to get back into my commitments. I
Right.
need to be doing this, that, and the other. So
Yeah,
that
the
has a
should
different.
versus yeah. You know what I'm going to say? Because since we're in the spirit of saying things that speak to the smaller populations or the lesser
Population
validated
again.
parts, I think that if you're somebody who goes into being sick, maybe does binge during that time or does find that food gets a little wonky because appetite goes up, psychology gets off, and all these things, that it's also okay to find structure and like a nourishing structure post being sick. So again, the anchor meals is for me, that's the way I would talk about it. You can think about it however you like, but something like
Thank you.
being more yes, I need to validate that you might not think of it the way I do. But being intentional about taking care of yourself that way might be also appropriate. Because I know that well, sometimes we don't have the energy. We just when we're sick, we don't have the energy to think about food or to be intentional with it. So we do potentially end up eating things that we're like, okay, right. I'm kind of waking up out of this stupor and I'd like to offer myself some more nourishment in different ways. I'd like to make sure that I'm getting different food groups that I've been missing over the past few days. And at that point, maybe the capacity is larger to do that and to give yourself permission to do that. You don't need to say, well, I'm not supposed to be restricting, so I'm just going to keep on binging. It might be relevant to, again, it depends what side of the pendulum you're on, but you can, if you're on this side of the pendulum that we speak less to, or I speak less to sometimes, it's okay to give yourself more structural support.
It's the gentle nutrition principle, right?
Yes, correct. Thank you. That was a quick way.
But you were putting it into context to just go, yeah,
Okay.
you could think about gentle nutrition afterwards.
Mm-mm.
That's not very orienting for people.
There's a lot of pathologizing that happens when we're sick. And maybe some of the things we've said here could be helpful. It's like, oh, maybe I'm not the only one. Or, oh, maybe that is normal. I don't have to worry so much about this way that I react when I'm sick. And hopefully this episode lends you some insight into that.
Yeah. And even being able to anticipate the change in appetite. Because I think every time my appetite diminished when I was sick, I was like, oh, I'm just It's not going to come back, right? This is me now. I think this illness has reset my eating disorder. I think I
Yes.
genuinely thought that before.
I have to, because it's so not present in like
Yeah.
a moment like that. You're like, yeah, I'm
I just
better.
can't imagine it. I can't imagine ever wanting to binge again. So I guess I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Yeah. Good call.
Yes. Alrighty.
All right. Well, stay well, everybody. Use your
Yes.
tissues.
Yeah. And wash your hands
Yeah.
and blow your nose. Okay. Enough.
Okay. Bye.